states in the U.S. have started to legalize marijuana, and marijuana is used medically. Is marijuana really that bad?
So it's interesting that you asked that. It's because the perception that marijuana is bad or harmful has been decreasing over the years, but marijuana really is harmful. And I think one of the things that teens should really understand is marijuana is particularly harmful for teens and harmful for their brain development.
What is marijuana, and how does it affect the body?
So marijuana itself is actually a plant. It's a plant that has compounds called cannabinoids, and there are over 100 cannabinoids in the marijuana plant. But two that we hear about most often include tetrahydrocannabinols, which we call THC, and cannabidiol, which we refer to all the time as CBD. Now, THC is the compound in marijuana that's responsible for its psychoactive effects. It's the thing that has the mind-altering effects that we associate with marijuana use. And THC, when you use marijuana, THC circulates throughout your body and goes to the brain. And when it reaches the brain, it binds to receptors called cannabinoid receptors. And those receptors are on nerve cells that control parts of your brain that control things like learning, memory, coordination, and attention. And that's one of the reasons when you use marijuana, you actually disrupt those normal functions, the normal functions of things like learning, memory, attention, and coordination. And that's why marijuana has its effect.
Another thing we're told in school is that not only is it bad for you, but it's also a gateway drug. So what is this gateway drug, and what are your thoughts on that?
So we've heard that term used for decades now. Marijuana is a gateway drug, and that's been very controversial. But the honest truth is the science on whether marijuana use leads to use of other drugs, which is what we mean by gateway, the science on that is still not clear yet. But I think what we need to really understand is that there are a lot of factors that affect whether someone who uses marijuana will go on to use other drugs. And those factors include maybe history of mental illness, social factors, family history of addiction, whether their peers offer them other drugs, and whether other drugs are available, and there are other factors as well. So the risk of someone going on to use another drug, it has a lot of different risk factors, and I think we should be really conscious of those and focus on those risk factors.
According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, 1 in 3 teens have used marijuana and 6% use it daily. Have these statistics gone up, say, from 10 or 20 years ago?
It's interesting, the prevalence or the rate of marijuana use in teens, as well as the rate of daily use among teens, really has not changed dramatically over the last 10 to 20 years. It's been fairly stable. We haven't seen dramatic increases, but we also haven't seen any dramatic decreases in the rate of marijuana use. And that's really interesting and noteworthy that we haven't seen decreases, because we have seen decreases in teen use of other substances like tobacco and alcohol, but marijuana seems to be resistant to those changes that we're seeing in other substances.
There's different types or strains of marijuana and many different ways to ingest them. Are some forms more beneficial or harmful than others?
Well, all of the forms of marijuana that we've talked about contain THC. And as I mentioned, THC can affect your brain. And so any form that you use that has THC is going to have harmful effects. So there isn't a safer form than others. Now, there are some differences and different risks that you might experience depending on what type or what form of marijuana you use. And so eating or drinking marijuana, which we call consuming edibles, has different risks than smoking marijuana. For instance, edibles, they actually take longer to take effect. So some people who eat edibles don't feel an effect, and then they consume more marijuana. And the unfortunate result of that is they may actually wind up consuming a really high dose of marijuana and get really negative health consequences, like they may experience anxiety, paranoia, and in some rare cases, they might even experience a psychotic reaction. Similarly, smoking has different health effects as well. The smoke from marijuana has the same irritants, carcinogens, and toxins that we see in tobacco smoke, which we know has its own risks. And then there are respiratory effects of smoking anything. And so smoking marijuana can increase your risk of bronchitis. It can increase cough and phlegm production. So there are different risks for different forms, but all forms are risky.
With all these different forms having different effects, are there other effects that are typically seen in people who are regularly using marijuana?
So I think in teens, there are some risks that they should be really particularly aware of. So teens' brains are still developing. They won't be really developed until they get to be about in their mid-20s. And so as we mentioned earlier, brain effects are really important. So teens may be particularly susceptible to the negative effects on the brain. So teens who regularly use marijuana may have problems with thinking, with memory, with paying attention. And those are all really important skills for teens, particularly who are in school. And so what we do see sometimes is teens who regularly use marijuana have problems with school performance. And then some studies show that long-term teens who use marijuana have problems getting employment later, or they may have decreased income. So there are particular concerns for the adolescent population.
Can they get addicted to marijuana? And here at the CDC, do you view addiction as a disease?
Definitely we view addiction as a disease, and definitely you can become addicted to marijuana. That's a really common misperception, that people think that they can't become addicted to marijuana, but marijuana is addictive. And one of the things that I really want to emphasize is that because teens' brains are developing, they're actually at a higher risk of becoming addicted than adults. And teens who become addicted to marijuana or who use marijuana are actually at a higher risk of becoming addicted to other substances as well. So yes, you can definitely become addicted.
So are there any health benefits to marijuana?
That is such an excellent question, because that's constantly being debated right now. And one of the things we did as an agency is co-sponsor a report about a year ago. It was published by the National Academy of Sciences to really try to understand, what do we really know about the health effects of marijuana, both the harms and the potential benefits. And so one of the things that the report writers did was look at the 21 conditions that people currently recommend marijuana might be useful for. And it was interesting because one of the things we learned, the bottom line, is that we really do not have enough data around the health effects and the potential benefits. They only found 3 conditions where marijuana might be helpful. Those conditions include reducing nausea and increasing appetite, which might be helpful for people with chemotherapy or things like that. They found that marijuana might be helpful at reducing pain, and they also found that marijuana might be helpful in reducing the muscle spasms that are experienced for people with multiple sclerosis. But the bottom line is, for all the other conditions, we just really do not have enough data to say whether marijuana is beneficial or not. And so one of the things that they really emphasized at the end of the report is we have to do a lot more research to really understand the benefits of marijuana.
So to find out more about the benefits and just more about marijuana in general, you spearheaded the CDC's marijuana CrossAgency workshop, is that correct?
So yes, we have a cross-agency work group at CDC that works on marijuana. One of the things that we learned as an agency when we started to delve into this topic is that this topic cross-cuts all areas of health. So CDC has divisions that work on smoking and reproductive health and occupational health and injury. Well, all of those issues are touched on by marijuana. And so to do a really good job as an agency, we all have to work together and bring our knowledge from all those areas to bear on this topic. And so for the past 3 or 4 years, we've been working seamlessly as a collaborative to really address this issue and the public health pieces of this issue. So at CDC, we're really focused on 3 things. The first thing, we're really trying to understand the trends. This is a really rapidly moving issue. We really want to understand the trends in use and how those trends affect the health of Americans. Secondly, we're really trying to understand and share expert information. We really want to understand what the health effects are and to share those with the public. So one of the things we did last year's co-sponsor report from the National Academy of Science to really understand what we know about the science of marijuana. And one of the things we're currently doing is taking that information, which is a thick tome of scientific information, very hard for a lay person to understand, and translating that into materials that the public can understand, so they really understand what the risks are around marijuana. And we're looking for channels to kind of disseminate that. And then the final thing, the third thing that I mentioned that we're doing is really trying to work very closely with our state public health partners, because as I mentioned, this is evolving really, really quickly, and we're learning as we go. So we're working with state public health officials to really collect those lessons learned, really to share resources about what we know and don't know about marijuana, and really try to identify what our best practices are to protect the public's health.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I've certainly learned a lot.
I have too. Thank you.
Thank you so much.